One thing is true, though, when you look at it from the context of what I'm building today is going to be an asset that I will sell one day. Those buyers are going to give you a multiple of your EBITDA. So it doesn't matter if you have 10 million in revenue, but 100,000 in EBITDA. What's way better, and I think this is better for your lifestyle too, is you're doing 5 million in revenue and 2.5 million in EBITDA, or 2 million in EBITDA, and you're able to sell that business for, let's just call it, 15 to 18 million dollars one day. You know, like that is really, really cool.
Welcome to the Deep Specialization Podcast, the show where we blend focus, strategy, and client intimacy in order to scale and simplify our businesses and our lives. I'm your host, Quinn. Let's jump into the show. Welcome back to the Deep Specialization Podcast. Today we have an amazing guest. He's a friend of mine. He embodies the journey from humble beginnings to big success in the agency world. And now he focuses on helping agency founders do the same. My guest is Chris Martinez. He's the CEO and founder of Bloom. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you so much, man. I know that we've been planning this for a while, and it's my fault that we haven't been able to do it sooner, but I'm so stoked to finally be here.
Oh, I'm just thrilled for you to be here. I'm thrilled for our conversation. And I know that our audience is going to get a ton of value, both from your background, but also the impact of the work you're doing right now with agencies. So could you just give us a little bit of information, just give a sort of an update on where you are today as it relates to the work you're doing, Bloom, what do you do, what problems do you solve, and then we'll kind of get back into your backstory.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's really, like, when you look at like the what of what we do, it's really just two things. So the first part is management consulting. So agencies that are having a fair amount of success, but there's just things that aren't professionalized yet. Maybe they don't have the right people, processes, systems, financials, those types of things. They come to us and they hire us because they want to fix that, with the ultimate goal for them being an exit one day. Maybe that's 2 years, maybe it's 20 years, but they want to make sure that they're setting the business up so that when that time comes, they can sell it for a big chunk of change. So that's one side. That's our biggest side. And then we also do mergers and acquisitions. So my business partner, Alan, also our team member, Ruben, if an agency is looking to sell, then we can do that deal for them, find them the perfect buyer and help them make a ton of money. Also on the acquisition side, if they're looking to acquire an agency as part of their growth strategy, that's also something that we can help them with. So that's what
Awesome.
That's the fun stuff that we're working on every single day.
Beautiful. And, you and I were together. I was at your event. I had the opportunity to speak on your stage. And one of the things that stood out to me was just the raw opportunity in the marketplace for agencies who are looking to be acquired.
Yeah.
Based on some of the presentations at your event, there's just literally trillions of dollars of what they call dry powder money that is looking to be deployed in this category of agencies. And so I think it's a super interesting time. And so I definitely want to cover off on what are the things that acquirers are looking for, what should agency owners be doing now in order to set themselves up for selling at a premium level, all of those things.
Yep.
But before we do, I want to learn more about you. I want to understand what were the things in life and business that led you to running this company and helping agencies the way that you do.
Yeah, I like this question. I knew that it was coming, so I had a little bit of time to prepare. I want to give you all, the listeners, something new, maybe that I've not yet shared. I grew up in LA like you did, and I think we're about the same age. I grew up in Torrance, so, probably 20 minutes away. If there's no traffic, It's 20 minutes away. If there's traffic,
down the street.
3 hours. It was a tough time for me. I didn't have a very good home life, a lot of physical, emotional abuse that I had to deal with growing up. And because of that, this is what I've learned through therapy. Because of that, it manifested itself into me being kind of like a hoodlum kid when we got to my teenage years. And I ran with that bad crowd. And do you vividly remember the Rodney King riots the same way that I do?
Sure.
Yeah, I remember they shut down the whole city.
I remember it on TV, but I didn't live it in that way. But probably the biggest impact I had, just to share for a sec, was I went to a public school, LAUSD public school, And it was in a part of town that was a lot of kids from the inner city were bussed in to this campus. And these were the kids that were in the middle of the LA riots, the Rodney King and all that.
Yep. Yep.
And so what I remember is the tension that was on campus.
Yep.
All these young kids were all in high school, and literally the city was rioting. And so it was
Yep.
definitely an emotional time for a lot of people.
Totally. And you know, I was a sociology major in college at UCSB, and we spent a significant amount of time, this is 20 something years ago, talking about the riots and what that meant for people, like that trial. So for those that don't know, Rodney King got beaten by the LAPD. It was very, very clear that he got the crap beat out of him. And the community had been saying that there was police abuse on citizens for decades. This was the first time it was caught on camera. And so that community was finally, they felt like finally what we've been talking about is going to be validated, and these police officers are going to be held accountable. And then the verdict came back and all of them were acquitted. And then all hell broke loose. and it was just, you know, the whole city was on fire, or that whole area, I should say, was on fire for like a week. The point of the story that I'm trying to make is that as this troubled kid who's now creating this little group of other troubled kids, you know, like we're looking at all the violence, and, you know, we're like embracing gangster rap and like all these other things. And like, you know, we were shitty little kids, you know, but at the end of the day, we were kids. And I'm making this point because some of my friends, I would say the majority of my friends that I had during that time, they just kind of disappeared eventually. You know, like I was fortunate that my parents had a little bit of money and they were able to put me in club soccer, you know, travel soccer. So I was playing soccer a lot. And that's really, in my opinion, that's the only difference. That's the difference between me disappearing and me doing what I'm doing today, is just because of the luck that I had one great parent and they had a little bit of money and they could invest in me being able to play soccer. That's it, you know? And so from a business standpoint, I always consider myself an underdog. To me, that's a great word. And I see the agency owners that we work with, and a lot of them are, I would say the overwhelming majority of them are kind of like underdogs too. Didn't come from money, first generation entrepreneurs, working their asses off, didn't get handed anything, working their asses off, and now have, you know, a multi-million-dollar business sometimes, or a lot of the times. They've built this multi-million-dollar business through blood, sweat, and tears, and then they get stuck. And I just absolutely love helping these folks, you know, achieve a dream. Because, hey, so I don't know if you got to see Kyle's talk. He was the wealth advisor that was there, super, super tall guy. So he had everybody write down, why are you doing this? You know, like think deeply about why you're building this business. And I was playing along, and I was thinking about when I got started, what I was looking for was validation. Because that kid from 91 to 98 was absolutely looking for validation, just trying to prove that I was worth something. And I recognized that in myself when I started my agency. That's not the motivation anymore. Don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of people out there that I'm going to prove wrong. But at the end of the day, like I'm way more comfortable with who I am as a person, that I'm not looking for that external validation in my business. Because at the end of the day, the people that only like you because you've reached a certain level of success or you have money or whatever, those are not your real people. Those are the fake fair weather friends that'll come and go, you know? But in terms of like the work that we do, like I just absolutely love helping those underdogs, because in a way, like I'm trying to tap back into that kid who just needed some help and some guidance, you know, and I want to help that person. So I will say, you know, obviously there's a happier end to the story. When I got to high school, I really, really got focused on soccer. So I know your son plays. 1994, when I was 14, we had the World Cup in the United States. And that was the first time I'd ever even heard of the World Cup. And then after that, it was the summer before I went into to high school. And I was just all in on soccer. I wanted to be a professional soccer player. I wanted to play in the World Cup and all these things. Life had a different path for me. I didn't end up making it, obviously. But, you know, I ended up getting through high school. I went to college at UC Santa Barbara. That experience absolutely changed my life. And that is really where the seed of entrepreneurship was planted, because I started to recognize that there were other things that I could do with my life than just what all my other friends' parents were doing and what my parents were doing. My parents were not entrepreneurs. And when you're a kid, your perception of what's possible is really what you see your parents doing and what you see your
Your
friends' parents
environment.
doing. Your environment,
Yeah.
100%. So if you don't see somebody who's an entrepreneur and you don't get to see what the life of an entrepreneur looks like, good and bad, it doesn't even dawn on you that you can do that. Just like if you don't ever meet a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or a scientist in your life growing up, it doesn't even dawn on you that that's possible. So through my university experience, I bring this up because a lot of people are shitting on four-year universities. I do understand they are crazy priced. For me, the value of that college experience was, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
What happened in college that exposed you, or maybe after college exposed you to the entrepreneurial lifestyle? Like, was there someone in your life at that time that you modeled, or how did that unfold?
Yeah. So I'll tell you a very specific story that happened to me. It was either my freshman or my sophomore year. So I was talking to this kid, Noah, and, we were obviously the same age. His dad was a little bit older, though, right? My parents were also older. My parents had me, my dad was 33 and my mom was 32. So in 1980, that was definitely outside the
Yeah.
norm. But
Yeah.
Noah's dad was like, much, much older than any of the parents that I'd ever met. And so we were just chatting like kids do, because you have time in between classes. And I don't think we were drinking at the time. So it was like that 5-hour window when we weren't drinking. I'm talking to him, and somehow the topic of parents came up. And he was telling me the story of his dad. His dad was a stockbroker, and his dad had made all this money being a stockbroker.
Yeah.
And then when he turned 40, he decided, okay, well, now that I'm financially set, I'm going to start a family. I'm going to get married. I'm going to have kids. Oh, I know what it was. It was because Noah's dad was retired already. So his dad worked his ass off, made a ton of money, and at 40 retired and then started a family. And I remember that moment so clearly, because in my mind, I was like, holy crap, I didn't know you could do that.
Right. You had no context for that.
I didn't know that you could do that in life.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, being an entrepreneur and, I recognize the opportunities and how everybody can pick their own path, basically. But back then, as an 18, 19-year-old kid, that was just like mind-blowing for me. So that was one very, very specific moment where it's a great example of how that one little conversation that we had in a dorm room changed the entire trajectory of how I thought about the world.
And you made the point already, but being at college gave you that opportunity to have that conversation with Noah, who had a different background than you did.
Exactly. And there were so many little conversations. Like, so Santa Barbara is really interesting because it's not technically the middle, but it was almost like the meeting place between Northern California and Southern California. And so the kids in Northern California, they grew up way differently. You probably experienced this.
I went to Santa Cruz. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So that's definitely more NorCal. But, they say hella. They don't say the 5 freeway. They say 5 freeway. Just like these little things that we would like, oh, our way is better and stuff like that. I remember there were these kids from a very wealthy part of San Jose, California. They would have their grad night. The other thing that was crazy is that, like, when I was growing up, if you were smart, you were a nerd, and you typically were not very athletic.
Remember the movie Nerds?
Yes, of course. Exactly. So
they were not the cool kids.
I was smart, but I kind of had to pretend like I wasn't smart, because then I would be labeled dork.
Right.
But then I was athletic. I've always been very athletic. And so when I got to college, I met all these kids. It was like you see in the movies. The star quarterback happens to also be the valedictorian. And I was like, that doesn't happen where I'm from. So little things like that. I remember they were also telling me a story of how on their grad night, everybody would go out and they'd get wasted, and the adults would buy them alcohol, which was just mind-blowing to me. And then if they got in trouble, the police would just drive them home. Nobody got thrown in the drunk tank at 18 years old. I'm like, what is this place? This does not happen.
Very innocent world. It's long gone now.
Yeah. It was like, there was a movie. What was that movie where it was like black and white? and the characters were they got sucked into a TV show, and it was all black and white, and then they turned color.
I
Oh my God.
vaguely
We'll have
remember.
to put it into the show notes.
Show notes,
Anyways,
yeah.
so yeah, so that was really, really interesting. Just the different perspectives or the
Yeah.
different
And
backgrounds that
so
people came from.
what was your first entrepreneurial venture?
I mean, I don't know if you would classify this, but I really liked to throw parties in college. And so I
Okay.
created a fake company. We didn't like file a DBA or anything like that, but we would have like this event company that we would do. That was pretty entrepreneurial. Actually, you know what? I did do something in college that I do consider entrepreneurial. So at college, they had a program where if you had a learning disability like dyslexia or ADHD or whatever, you could have another student in the class take notes for you. And then the university would pay that student that's taking notes. And it was like $250 quarter. So I did that. And it was great because it forced me to go to class because I was getting paid. So I had to load up on units because I took a little bit of time off of school to work, and then when I came back, I was so far behind. I had to take 20 units a quarter for like 4 or 5 quarters in a row just to get caught up and graduate. But it forced me to go to class, and I had like 5 classes that all needed note takers. So that quarter, I got paid like $1,200, which in 2003, and being a broke college student, that's like a ton of money.
It pays for a lot of college, yeah.
Yeah, you know. The next quarter, none of my classes needed note takers. So I was like, well, crap, like there goes that revenue stream. So I decided to sit in on Sociology 1 and take notes. And then before the midterm and before the final, I had my friend that worked at a copy store print up for free a bunch of these little sheets that says, need notes for the midterm, contact this number. And so I put those on all the chairs. And granted, this is a huge lecture hall. It's got like 1,000 seats, 1,000 students in this lecture hall. Put it on all the seats. I made like $1,500 from that. So I would say true entrepreneurial, like that was my first true like entrepreneurial venture. The first business that I actually formed was a soccer magazine, though. That was in 2007, right after my dad died. He died of cancer. He was diagnosed. He died within a month. And then I had this crazy idea that I was going to start the soccer magazine because I love soccer. Great product. Terrible, terrible idea in the end. I lost all my money. That's a whole hour-long show we can talk about.
Sure. So you lost your dad, and then a month later, you started a business.
Just like 2 months later. So okay. My dad, we'll spend a little bit of time there. So my dad he had a back pain, right? He was 59 at the time. So, you know, what 59-year-old doesn't have lower back pain? And he kept going to the doctor, and they're, you know, running tests, and they're giving him medicine. They think it's bacterial or viral or whatever. And it's just not, you know, it would get better, but then it would get worse. And then eventually, this is December, I think it was like December 9th or 8th. They ran some more tests, and then I get the phone call, and I'm living in Redondo Beach at the time, and he's up in Palos Verdes in PV. And I get the call, and they're like, hey, I need you to drive up to the house. And it was just one of those things where you know that what's coming after that is not a good conversation. I will say that everything that was going on in my life up to that point was pretty dang good. You know, like I got a job out of college that I was working in sales, right? And I did really well, and I became one of the youngest managers in the whole company. You know, it was 30,000 salespeople or something like that. I was top 10%. Wow. I left that job, and I was, you know, started doing some kind of freelance sales, 1099 contractor sales. You know, like I was finding my way. And then I get to my dad's house, and I'll never forget like the lighting of the room. It was, you know, it's December, so it's dark out early, and they only had like one light on in the living room, and it was like a lamp that was lit. So, and then like the TV screen was on, just kind of in the background with the mute. It was muted. And then he said, you know, we have some bad news. We went to the doctor. I got diagnosed with liver cancer. So immediately we Google, when we get home, Google like survival rates for liver cancer, and it's like 10%. It's pretty bad. I call my brother. He's 3 years younger, and we are like, you know, just kind of chit chat about it. He and I aren't super close, and we don't talk a lot, but you know, we had to have a conversation about this. And from that point on, we had a lot more tests that they were going to run, and we were going to see other doctors, and about 2 weeks go by, and they do an endoscopy. And that 2 week period from December 9th to, I believe it was like December 20th or something like that, he declined health-wise really, really bad. Like, it was a massive decline in that 2 week
Wow.
period. And so they do the endoscopy. The doctor come out of the I don't know if it's considered the OR, and they're like, hey, we have some bad news. It's actually pancreatic cancer. And the reason why we thought that it was liver cancer is because it had metastasized to the liver. My dad was so skinny. I remember he was in that hospital bed after the endoscopy, and he was so skinny in his neck. You could see his heart beating through his neck. And I'd never seen that before. You know, I'm 26 at the time. And when we got that news, then we knew that it's over. Like, this is game over. There's really nothing else that we're going to be able to do. We didn't want to admit it. We didn't want to talk about it. But in the back of our minds, we knew at the end that this was going to be the end.
Oh,
Right?
it's inevitable.
And I actually, speaking of parties, going back to my parties, I threw a New Year's Eve party that same month, and we sold tickets and stuff like that. And so I had this big New Year's Eve party. Me and my dad is at the condo that he lived at, dying, literally dying. And so I'm trying to put on this New Year's Eve party and like be happy and fun. And all I wanted to do really was just be with him.
Oh, yeah.
January 2nd. So New Year's party goes great. Didn't go great, but it went okay. New Year's Eve party goes good. And I show up to I get a call from my stepmother on January 2nd. And she's like, I need you to come to the house. He's not able to take fluids. Can you take him to the urgent care to try and get some fluids? He was very against going to the hospital because he was like, I don't want to die. He told me, he's like, I don't want to die in the hospital. So he didn't want to go to the hospital. So I take him to urgent care, and they look at him. They're like, you need to get him to an emergency room now.
Yeah.
Take him to the emergency room, wheel him in. They're like, he's in very bad shape. He's going to be here for a while. You need to go out and park the car. And over the next week, we talked to doctors. I remember there was one doctor who specializes in end-of-life care. I can't remember the specialty of his. The cancer doctor, who is a living piece of shit, and I hate you to this day, Dr. Delotti, wherever you are. We were fighting to try and get this guy to come and see my dad for 2 days. He shows up, and he's like, your dad's got 3 months to live. I was livid. Like, I'm a very aggressive human being, especially when I'm angry. So I'm like, where the fuck have you been? We've been waiting for everybody saying that you're going to save my dad. And he just casually strolls in one day, and he's like, your dad's got, like, I asked, like, how long does he have? He's like, 3 months. My dad died like 5 days later or 4 days later, right? So we end up talking to this end-of-life care doctor because I'm in the hospital from the moment they allowed me to be there, from 5:30 in the morning or whatever, 5 a.m., 6 a.m., until they kick me out at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm there all day long, just being there with him, making sure that he's comfortable, and he's drifting in and out of consciousness. And I talked to this end-of-life doctor, and I'm like, I need you to tell me, like, how much time do we have? And he's like, at this point, you guys are going to be lucky if you have 3 weeks. And I'm like, well, the cancer doctor said we had 3 months. What do you mean? And he's like, I'm sorry, that guy did not tell you the right information.
Oh.
So what happens is we end up arranging for him to go home. They released him oh my gosh, what's the name of the service? Hospice. They release him to hospice care. I go to the house, I set up the bed, and it's just very strange feeling that, like, I'm setting up the bed that my dad's going to die in. And so he comes back to the house. He was there for another day, and then at around 12:20 in the morning on January 10th, he died. And we were all there with him by his side. Deep stuff, man.
Yeah. It's interesting because I have a dad who's in my dad is actually in long-term care right now. So we can continue the chat, but
yeah, it's really, really hard, Corey. Like if you've not gone through it, this is what I tell people who are losing parents to cancer or loved ones to cancer. Your brain is incapable of preparing you for that amount of pain and loss. It is too overwhelming for your brain to even comprehend. And so whenever that time comes and your person moves on to the next journey, your brain's going to do all kinds of crazy things.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
normal. And that's okay. And don't be ashamed of it.
Yeah. So you had your father passed, and then what were the conditions in your life that led you to, starting a business? Like that was going to be your next focus,
Yeah.
right?
If I'm honest, I'm always honest. It was that validation piece. I wanted to, this is where I'm going to cry. Because he didn't get to see me build the type of success that I wanted. I wanted to prove to him through this soccer magazine that I was worth it. That I was worth something. I don't think I've ever talked about this on a show before. So you are getting an exclusive from me.
Beautiful.
And that was the absolute worst reason to start a business. And so that magazine failed miserably, and I lost all my money, and I had all this debt on top of that because I was still trying to process the grief, which I didn't do very well until I ended up getting some therapy and I learned how to do it. I learned the skills to deal with the grief. So I lost all this money, but there was a part of me, because I funded this thing with life insurance that I got from my dad's death. It wasn't a lot of money, but there was a part of me.
There's a lot of meaning attached to that money.
But here's the thing. The way that I looked at that money is I looked at it as it was blood money.
Right.
And I didn't want it. I didn't want to feel like I was profiting from my dad's death. So when I lost everything, and this is a weird thing that people do when it comes to like self-destructive behavior, when I lost all that money, when literally it's all gone, and then all these creditors are chasing me because I owe them a lot more money. But when it's all gone, I felt a sense of relief. And it's stupid. I mean, somebody hands you a check, like, be wise with that money. My dad wanted me to keep that to be able to do something, buy a house one day or something like that, But
So do you think
I
that,
felt a lot of
yeah,
relief by getting rid of that money at the end of the day.
do you think that was a factor in the let's call it the failure of the soccer magazine business?
I think so. Well, no, I mean, if we're doing facts, not feelings, I made every mistake that you could possibly make. Like I was trying to do everything. I was too in love with my product. I didn't really look at the business model and see how we were going to be able to make it successful. I had zero experience in print publishing, by the way. This is 2007. It's the worst time in history to start a print magazine.
Right.
So that was really
Internet's
stupid.
taking off.
This is me letting my ego get in the way, trying to prove people wrong, trying to prove to my dad that I was worth it. Just doing the business for the wrong reasons and letting my emotions drive those decisions and not logic and reason and facts.
You mentioned that you went to therapy. How has that therapy helped you to be a better founder and now coach to other founders?
I still go. Oh, well, I should admit, as of today, June 30th, I have not gone in about 5 weeks because I had a little health thing and I wasn't able to get around very well. But I have an appointment for next Monday. So I would not be alive had it not been for the therapist that I found in 2009. So between 2007 and 2009, I was an absolute nightmare. Like just angry all the time, wanting to fight everybody. That was my way of dealing with emotions. It's like straight to anger, and my fuse is very, very short. And my life was falling apart. And there was something that happened in my life, and I was just so angry that I was like chain smoking cigarettes, walking around the neighborhood in Manhattan Beach. And I was like, I couldn't see straight because I was so angry over nothing. Looking back, it was so stupid. And I'm like considering killing myself. I'm like, I can't continue to live like this. So when I look at my options that I have in my life, it's either I kill myself or I get better. And then I thought, my dad wouldn't be very happy with me if I killed myself. So, this is 2009, and what is that, 16 years ago now? Therapists weren't really online back then. So I had my giant book that the insurance company gives you. I gotten a job, right? Because I have to pay off this debt. So I have a job, and the health plan that I got through insurance or through the company, they give you this giant book, and then you find therapists through that. And so I'm going down the list of people that are in my area in Manhattan Beach, and I'm calling and calling and calling. Nobody answers the phone. So in my stupid brain, I'm like, well, I can't leave a message because somebody that I know might be in the room and my voice is going to be on the voicemail machine, which nobody uses anymore. But that's the craziness that was going on in my head at the time. So eventually nobody picks up. So I just start, eventually I'm like, oh, well, I have to leave a message. So I just say, hey, my name is Chris. I'd appreciate a call back. Here's my number. Click. And I do that to like 15 people. The first person that called me back was this woman named Susan. And so she's like, hey, I'll have you come in for an introductory appointment. And we sit down and I'm talking to her. And she was like pushing back on me. She's a ball buster, and it was exactly what I needed, because I was going to try and come in and bulldoze the situation. And, my anger was just fueling everything that I was doing at the time. And she's pushing back on me. And I'm like, this little older lady is like pushing back on me. She's maybe 110 pounds. And so I'm like, I don't like this, but I'm going to come back. So then we come back and we start going.
Something about it.
Yeah,
right.
Like regular, man, I don't know why this is triggering something in me. Regular sessions with her. And after like the third session, I would come in, and a lot of the times I'd come in and I'd be pissed about something. And I'm angry about, who knows what. Maybe it was my roommates at the time, or somebody said something, or something I saw on TV. Who the hell knows? And this particular time, I remember it was like I was blaming people or something like that. And she says like, okay. And I was like, well, this is the way that it is, or something like that. And she's like, okay, how's that viewpoint, basically? How's that working out for you? And I was like, pissed. Because she's trying to propose that life is something different, that there's a different way of dealing with that situation. She's like, how's that working out for you? And I was like, motherfucker, she's right. And I started to learn kind of the stoic behavior, the stoicism, can't say that word, that ultimately it's up to me. That no matter what gets thrown at me, I still have the choice of how I'm going to respond to these different scenarios. And that's just one of the tools that she taught me. Because of my upbringing, and I think a lot of people experience this as well, is like, I was never taught how to deal with these different emotions. It's very clear, or common with men of our age that were born in that 70s to early 80s.
Yeah, we don't have the tool set. There's no context for us to learn that.
And what we were taught, or at least what I was taught, directly or indirectly, was like, boys don't cry. You just shove it down and keep going. Like, we don't talk about these things. But what happened in that scenario with me with the grief is that I didn't talk about it for 2 years, and it came bubbling back up to the surface. And then the only other options were suicide or go to therapy. You know what I mean? So Susan saved my life. And then I ended up moving to San Diego, and things started getting better again. Started the agency in 2012. From a therapy standpoint, though, I get more value as a CEO from my conversations with my therapist than I do pretty much any business guru that I talked to or worked with, or content that I digest. That for me is like the biggest thing, because at this level, it's all mental. Probably at any level, it's all mental. But like, you being able to keep your thoughts together and keep your shit together and keep your composure when things go wrong, because they are going to go wrong. Everything's going to break over and over and over. And so you learning the skills to be able to manage that is going to make the difference between success and failure.
I'm reminded of a great book again and again. It's a John Maxwell. He wrote a book, a lot of leadership books. And
yeah,
there's one book it's called The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And the one law is the law of the lid, right? Which is that a company can only grow as fast as this is my paraphrasing, but as fast as the limiting beliefs of the founder.
Yeah. The way that I rephrase that is, I say the business is a reflection of you.
Yeah.
So where you are is a reflection of who you are.
Let's talk about facts, not feelings. I know you wrote a book about that, but I also want to understand the philosophy behind that. Where did that come from for you? And how does that play sort of a through line in the work you're doing now?
Well, I've kind of given you a little bit of background on because of the soccer magazine, right? So just to talk about my agency life, right? So
Yeah.
2012, actually 2011, I think I started working for Reach Local, which back in the day they were on a tear doing PPC management, and they went public and they were hiring all these salespeople. And at that time, just to get into that story really quickly, I taught myself web design and I taught myself digital marketing for some other side projects, crazy entrepreneurial side projects that I had. And so then I got a job at Reach Local. And what really helped is my background. Like I understood websites and I understood digital marketing and PPC and stuff like that. Well, Reach Local didn't do websites. And so I decided, because I would sell them these PPC campaigns.
Scorpion ended up doing the
The,
fulfillment for those, by the way.
did you
For the
really?
website.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So back in the day, this is 2012. You guys must have come in later. We were driving traffic to just crappy landing or crappy websites, and then they wouldn't convert, of course. And
Yeah.
I was like, well, why don't you guys have websites? It's just not something that we do. And like, you can develop relationships with people in the area, and you can refer them to business. And I was like, hell no, like I can do this. So I started an
Exactly.
agency. I didn't even call it an agency back then. And so that's basically what we did. And then I was moonlighting for a year. And then 2013, I got let go I ended up becoming an online ad sales manager at two newspapers in LA. You know them. It's the Daily Breeze and then the Long Beach Press Telegram. I was the online ads manager, sales manager for those two. And then they let me go. They were like downsizing. Plus, I hated it. I hated the people. It was like one of the worst jobs I ever had. And then I was like full-time agency and, off to the races with that. My idea with this web design agency was that we were going to get 1 million customers. And at first we had a package that was like $30 a month, including the hosting and like 2 blog posts a month. And also I was like, we're going to get 1 million customers and we're going to make so much money, and very emotional, right?
Yes.
And of course, like we were getting customers and I was building this thing up. I wasn't making a ton of money, and we had a little team in the Philippines and I was working 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. every single day. But it felt like we were making progress. Eventually, we built that business up and we had a couple hundred clients. We had raised our prices. So we were doing, I don't know, maybe $500,000 in revenue. And I still wasn't able to pay myself though. I was like, how is it that we're selling so much, but at the end of the day, like there's no money left over for growth, and there's definitely no money left over for me. And I didn't know how to do like a proper pro forma. Like I didn't know how to look at our financials. Again, I was all feelings. Like I feel like it should be working, but it's not.
Yeah. I'm doing the things. Why isn't it working? Thing.
So then we end up launching, because by the time we were at that having over 200 clients on retainer, and I'd built a team in Mexico. So I was one of the first people to go down into Tijuana and build a team to do fulfillment for my websites and all the other things that we were doing. And I was like, I wonder if I can build an outsourcing company after learning about Design Pickle back in the day. Yeah, and I launched it. So I called it Dude, because we're from Southern California and we say dude all the time, right? It's just a fun term. Yeah. And we started getting clients. I started running ads. We started getting clients for our unlimited design and development for agencies program. That's what we offered back then. And we would use this team in Mexico, and like that was revolutionary back then. They're like, some people were like, I didn't even know they had internet in Mexico. I was like, oh my God. This is 2017, by the way. It's not like it was 1996 or something. So that picked up steam. We ended up getting a booth at the Traffic and Conversion Conference in 2018. And from that event alone, we generated over $400,000 in revenue. So now we're on a hiring tear. We went from 5 people to 30 people in like 9 months or something like that. Business is growing. And then in 2019, I hit the same roadblock. The company's going well revenue-wise. We were right around $900,000 on just Dude. But there's not enough money left over at the end of the month. It's always like we're struggling to pay the bills. And like my business partners at the time was like, hey, we can't afford this. And I'm like, how? How is this possible? So eventually I invest in Russ Perry. He had a coaching program and he taught me the proper way to do, like, what your financials should look like. This is what a CEO is responsible for. He taught me the facts of what an agency owner is supposed to do. And then I took that and I ran with it. I mean, like, we changed all of our numbers. We brought in the right people, all facts. You know, my wife came in because she's an expert on HR and hiring, and she built out job descriptions and just, you know, we revitalized the entire company. 2020, we had like a couple scary months when COVID hit, but it ended up being our most profitable year that we had. And I was able to triple my own salary, all because I was able to run the business now based on facts and not feelings. Massive, massive difference. We won this Stevie Award, which I think you can probably see right here. Most innovative company under 100 employees. Actually, that was our second place trophy, was most innovative. We got a minority-owned business of the year for 2021. And, you know, like, so we're doing well. And then eventually we started coaching our clients on how to run their business with facts, not feelings. And then we ended up pivoting out of doing the outsourcing business model, because in my opinion, it's just a dying business model now with all the technology and access and things like that. And now we're into the management consulting and M&A. And we rebranded in 2024. So the facts, not feelings really came from my experience, my personal experience and my failures, and recognizing that this is a common problem that all agency owners have. Unless you went to Harvard Business School or Wharton, or, you know, you got your MBA from Marshall, I think. Like, unless you learn the proper way to run a business, or you have family members that taught you, you kind of just don't know what you don't know. And the facts, not feelings mantra are really like words to live by, you know, so that how we're running our business, it's always, no matter what department, if it's finance, HR, operations, sales, marketing, finance, of course, it's always facts, not feelings. We're always going to make our decisions based on facts and not how we feel.
I love it. I love that you've lived in some respects, the accidental business owner. Many agency founders are, you know, they're great at websites, or they're ambitious and they figure out PPC, and then they start an agency and they build it to the place. You've been through that, and you've had some amazing breakthroughs, and now you've had this philosophical sort of approach, facts, not feelings, that to help you to break through some ceilings. And I definitely align with that approach. Let's talk about facts. What are maybe we should start with finance. Like, what are some areas within the financial aspects of an agency that the agency owners should be really clear about and obsess over?
Yeah. So let's look at it from the lens of the end goal, which is selling the business one day. Maybe not now, but there will come a time when you're like, hey, I'm ready to move on to the next thing. You know, I'm tired of doing this. I want to sell it off to someone. Maybe you'll get an offer, right, from somebody, because we all get those emails. And there will come a time when you're going to want to sell this thing. So from a financial standpoint, I need to be very, very clear that you are not going to get a multiple of just revenue. What they're going to look at is your EBITDA. They're going to look at your EBITDA and the trailing 36 months of EBITDA, and they're going to give you a multiple of that. I bring this up because there are a lot of people in the coaching space, and I coach people, but we don't run a coaching business, and that's just not what we do, really. There are people in the agency coaching world that say, hey, sell this package at $1,500 and this one at $2,500 and this one at $3,500. And then all you have to do is sell like 2 of each one, and this is what you're going to include in each package. And then within, 6 months, you're going to be at $83,000 a month. So you'll have that $1 million run rate, and life's going to be amazing. That sounds true. But the reality for a lot of people that follow that advice is that you're underpricing yourself, and you're not taking into consideration your cost of goods sold. And then what ends up happening is that it's not a very profitable business.
Right. It almost sounds like an arbitrary price is that you should just, these are the proven price tiers that you should use, and you kind of have to figure it out on the back end.
The reality is that every agency is a little bit different, right? Every market's different.
Every buyer, every market, everything. Yeah.
One thing is true though, when you look at it from the context of what I'm building today is going to be an asset that I will sell one day. Right. Those buyers are going to give you a multiple of your EBITDA. So it doesn't matter if you have 10 million in revenue, but 100,000 in EBITDA, right? What matters, what's way better, and I think this is better for your lifestyle too, is you're doing 5 million in revenue and 2.5 million in EBITDA, or 2 million in EBITDA, and you're able to sell that business for, let's just call it 15 to 18 million dollars one day. Like that is really, really cool.
Yes.
And so when we look at the financials, definitely have to have revenue, of course, cost of goods sold and gross margin. And if you can drill deeper, like you can go by line of business or by product. Then your operating expenses, your EBITDA, and your net income. Those are the numbers that you have to be looking at every single month. And if you say, well, I don't really like that. I'm not a numbers person. I'm not a numbers person either. But from the context of what you do in your job, like as a CEO of an agency, your job is to increase the value of the company. How do you know if you're increasing the value of the company? You look at the EBITDA, trailing 12 months, every single month. That is part of your job. That's what you signed up for.
Are there some ratios or sort of baseline metrics that you like to look for in an agency or work towards?
Yeah, totally. So we want to see 30% EBITDA or better. So anything less than 20% is not great. Anything less than 10% is definitely, there's a lot of room for improvement. Less than 20%, if we were to use the letter scoring in US schools, you're at about a D plus, C minus. 20 to 25% is about a C, 25 to 30% is about a B, and then if you're 30% plus, that's an A, right? That's what I want to see on the EBITDA.
Yep.
Cost of goods is the number one area where people are losing money. And so what we shoot for is 30 to 35% cost of goods. What does that mean? If you sell something for $1,000, you're able to get it fulfilled with all your labor and your software for around 30%, for $300. That's what we're shooting for. And then operating expenses, depending on how that math works out, it can be 20 to 40%, somewhere in there. But the EBITDA is really, really important.
Yeah, EBITDA, cost of goods sold, I've heard sort of rule of thumb is you want to charge 3 times your cost of goods.
I like to shoot for 3.5. I just add on a little 0.5.
Okay, yeah.
Let's create a little bit of padding. Let's create a little bit more padding in there.
When it comes to owner's salary, what do you typically find when that is off target? Like what are the typical ways that owners are not thinking about their salary in the right way?
So I have to tread lightly on this because I'm not a wealth advisor and I'm not a CPA. I will say that most agency owners are not paying themselves enough money. And part of that justification is like, we're growing the business and I'm willing to invest in other people, and I get that. But there comes a time where you need to be rewarded. It's too freaking hard for you to not get paid. I like to see at least 20% of the revenue going back to the owner. And that can be a combination of salary and distributions, however you want to do that. But let's make sure that you're getting paid. Like if you're running $1 million agency and you're not getting at least 200 grand in take home income, what are we doing? Like you got to be making money. And different parts of the country are more affordable than others. Like you live in Los Angeles or the Palisades. I'm down in San Diego, like both very expensive places to live. I love it though. Like, if anything, that should motivate you to go out there and grow the business and run it better so that you can get paid more. But I like to see at least 20%.
Well, I think from a valuation perspective, if you have a serious acquirer, even if you're only paying yourself in that context $100,000, they're going to assume what the cost of replacing the CEO would be in their calculations to determine their valuation and ultimately their offer for you.
Exactly. Right. Let's dive into that just really quickly. So you need to be paying yourself at least market rate if you're planning on selling in the next 3 years. Because what a buyer is going to do is, let's say you have $1 million in EBITDA, but you're only paying yourself 50 grand a year. Well, they're going to say, to replace you, I'm going to have to go out and hire a CEO, and they're going to be 250,000. So now your $1 million in EBITDA is now 800,000.
Right.
And the multiple on 800,000 is usually 2, 3, or 4x, versus the multiple on $1 million is going to be 3, 4, or 5.
Right.
So
Better
these are like
multiple.
that
Exactly.
$200,000 is a big difference to your pocketbook when you go to sell.
Yeah.
So always pay yourself market rate, especially those 3 years leading up to the sale.
That's great advice. Since we're talking about being acquired, what are some of the, let's call it financial documents and records that should be in place before you even think about selling?
Well, we have to have all the financials in place for trailing 3 years, but I say go back as far as 4 because we were just asked 4 and they were actually asking for 5 years back. Like all your P&Ls for sure, balance sheet, income statements, all that good stuff. That honestly, that's not my wheelhouse. That's Alan. He does all the number running. There's a list though. So basically, I can probably make this available to your audience if they're interested. There's an exit checklist that we have that lists out all of
Ooh,
this.
okay.
There's also a due diligence checklist and an ad backs checklist that we have access to. So somehow I'll make sure that your audience gets access to that. Maybe I'll drop it in the show notes or something. And that'll list
Fantastic.
out all the things that you have to prepare. So when you decide to sell, you're ultimately going to create, you're going to, work with somebody, or you're going to have to create what's called a data room or a data room, depending on how you say data or data. This data room, it's like the most complicated Google Drive that you've ever seen. They charge a crap load of money to have these things, these companies that build out these data rooms. And so there's going to be a folder, and in each folder, you have to upload documents in each. So all your financial documents are going to be in there. And you're doing this also knowing that the potential buyers, are also going to ask you a bunch of other questions. So just like really kind of like basics, you're going to need to know your churn rates. You're going to have your customer lists and how much those people were paying you for the past 3 years, right? So all of your customers, what each of those people were paying you month by month, the churn rates for every single one of those customers, and the overall churn rate. Of course, you're going to have the financials. You're going to have to forecast. So you're going to do a at least 2 years out forecast, realistic forecast. I don't know if you consider this financials, but you're going to have to know all your marketing and sales information, like cost of customer acquisition cost, close rates, the pipeline. Inside the financials, you're going to look at your ARPU, average revenue per unit. There's a million things, but these are kind of like the ones that stick out on the top of my head.
Love it. Well, it sounds like your checklist could be really helpful and valuable here. You talk about how even though you may not be thinking of selling your agency today, it's a better way to build a business such that it is built so that it could be sold one day. Can you talk
Yeah,
about that, the mindset, maybe changing from an agency operator to an owner of an
yeah.
asset? Like how do you think about that?
We talked about this a lot actually at the event.
Yeah.
So I have to talk to people every single week. At least once a week, I'm talking to somebody who's like, I want to sell, or I need to sell, and I want to get this number. And then I'm like talking to them. Okay, well, like, what's your EBITDA? What's your profitability? And if they know, it's usually very, very small. Like that number is very small. And there's just this gigantic gap. I talked to a woman recently in LA, and she's like, I'm running this business. I need to sell it. Like I just had a baby, and I can't do this business anymore. I've got other things that I need to do. The business is doing 500,000 in revenue. I'm like, okay, what's the EBITDA? 0. Okay, what are you looking to get for the business? 1.5 million. I'm like, there's just absolutely no way. And like, I hate to be the bad guy, but this is the honest truth. It's like that business is not worth, it's worth something, but it's definitely like nobody in their right mind is going to give you 1.5 million. It's just not worth that much. And that's the unfortunate situation, is like, you don't know when something will come up when you're going to need to sell the business. It's better to build it though, so that it can be sold, so that's an asset that can be sold for a good multiple. It's better to do that from the beginning than to run this thing, and maybe you're doing, $1 million in revenue, 7 figures or whatever, and then you go to sell it, and then it kind of feels like a kick in the balls when they're like, well, it's only worth 300,000, which happens all the time.
Yeah.
The other scenario that happens there is you're either going to close it down and walk away with nothing, or you're going to sell it for a crappy number. And a lot of the times there's these vultures that are coming in that are looking to take advantage of people that are in a tough spot. And they're basically going to give you a job, and they're going to pay you a wage, which is their, payment
Earn out.
plan. Yeah, their
Right.
earn out.
Right.
No interest, nothing, right? And then they fire you, and they
Yeah.
try and screw you out of the deal. Those are going to be your two options: walk away or take a crappy deal. So let's start thinking differently about the business, right? This is what a smart individual would do, I think. It's like, hey, if this is my end goal one day, then I'm going to make these small little improvements in the business over time so that we can get it to a place where it can be sold for a nice multiple. And, whenever that day comes, I'm not looking to sell. At the end of the day, the best way to build an incredibly healthy business is to build a business that you never actually want to sell because it's running so well. You got all the key team members
Yeah.
that are running it. You're not very involved. It's incredibly profitable and spitting off cash. And then when that buyer comes, they're going to have to give you that crazy multiple to take it off of your hands. You're like, hey, I'm clearing $2 million a year. $7 million isn't going to get it done because that's just, 3.5 years of pay for me. If
Right.
you really want to take this off my hand, you're going to have to give me a better offer. And then they maybe will come in for 15 to 20. You know what I mean?
Which happens.
Yeah. Yep.
So in addition to the finances, what else attracts great acquirers?
Team. So if you have a great team, I mean, this is something it's imperative to have because when you go to sell, you're not going to be there forever. You might be there for a year or two. But most founders after they sell, they want to spend some time on a beach, like go on a little vacation or you just relax. And so there has to be a team in place to be able to run the business without you. So they're going to look at, who's doing your account management, for example. Like if you are the one with the relationship with every single client, that's a bad thing. That will hurt you. And they'll give you a lower multiple because of that. If you're overseeing all of the fulfillment, that's also very, very bad. Because when you're gone, who's going to do that fulfillment? Like we need competent people running the business. As I'm saying these things, it is difficult to do. So when we look at all the things that we have to spend money on to build this business and then still be profitable, it is not easy. Like this is like spinning 15 different plates at the same time, making sure that none of them fall down. So you have to have great pricing, you have to have great marketing and sales strategy, you have to have great people that are paid very well. Like it's not easy. But those team members, they're so important, not just to you having a great business that you enjoy now, but when the buyer comes in, they're going to be like, okay, well, these people all run the company, good to go. This truly is a good investment for us.
So we're talking about systematizing, taking an agency, let's say that is more founder-led, maybe less dependent on systems, tried and true. How do you impact like the agencies that you work with? They're hiring you to help with this, or how do you help them on this journey?
Like our actual products that we offer?
Yeah,
Is that kind of your question?
Over
Okay,
Bloom,
cool.
yeah.
I'm happy to share this. I was not aware that we were going to be asked this question, but obviously I know our products. So
I want to hear about it.
We have two programs. So the first one is our incubator, and that's basically where you come in, you get access to our community, you get access to all the information that we know, all of our cheat sheets, all of our job descriptions, basically the entire playbook. And on top of that, you get to be able to ask us questions on our group calls that we do twice a week. And then we also have unlimited email support, and you and all of your employees have access to this. So it's like, hey, I need to hire this person. Like, how does this job description look? I tweaked it based on your template. This is what I need. What do you guys think? Email it in. We get back to you within 24 hours, give you our feedback. Hey, I need this resource. Hey, I got this question about my finances. My cost of goods sold, I just can't figure out how to get that down to 35%. I'm stuck at 45. What can I do? Group call or email in the question. It'll go to one of the experts that we have on our team. And so like even like a big one that we get is hiring and firing questions. Do you have a performance improvement plan template that I can use? Yes, we do. Do you have like how can I tweak this? What do I say to this employee that I need to let go? Like all those questions. Like what can I legally say to let this person go? All those questions can go to our HR expert, for example. So that's our incubator program. That's for everybody, but typically if you're under 2 million, that's where you'll sit. Definitely under 1 million, you'll be in the incubator. And then we have our accelerator program. You have to be at least at $1 million in revenue to get into that program. Most of the agencies that are in that program are 2 million plus. We have a couple requirements in addition to just the revenue. You have to have at least one leadership team member on staff right now. Yeah, at least one, just because there's a lot of things that need to happen, and we can't just put everything on the CEO's shoulders, because otherwise it's just not going to get done. Right? So they have to have at least one leadership team member in the seats. You have to be able to afford it. So we've already looked at your financials by this point and gone through everything, and we see the trajectory of where you're going. So we need to make sure that it is a financially good decision for you to be able to work with us. You have to be a great person, so we don't work with any jerks. And what else is there? Have to have a good business. Like you have to actually be getting results for clients. If your churn rates are really high because you have a crappy product and you're just selling them, this crappy, you're overselling them and saying, hey, I'm going to get you 100 leads for $1,000 a month, and you're just churning out customers. Like, we don't want any part of that at all.
What are the problems that they're trying to solve when they're coming into your program?
Yeah. Oh, one more thing about the accelerator too is we basically come in as your interim leadership team, and we run the company. Like, we are helping you to run the company. We're working with you every single week, fixing your financial problems, fixing your operational problems, making sure that we're getting the right people in the seats. Like, we do your recruiting and training and that sort of stuff. We're looking at your numbers, obviously, every single week, updating them in the pro formas to see how we're doing against forecast. That happens every single month. Helping you with your quarterly planning. We'll set up your leadership team meetings and how to track progress on all your big rocks and objectives that you have. Like, we come in and run the business alongside you, with the ultimate goal of eventually, when we're profitable enough, we'll come in and we'll recruit the people that are going to replace us, and then you're going to sell the company.
Interesting.
But yeah, so in terms of the problems, like, we get a lot of profitability questions because they've been following these gurus who've told them to sell a certain way, and like, don't take into consideration that, hey, there's got to be profit left over. So there's financial challenges where they're not very profitable. And these are fixable problems. A lot of people challenges. So I have this person and they're just not performing, and they've been with me forever. And I'm like, well, it's probably time to let that person go and like bring in somebody with experience. Hiring, training, HR. We do a little bit of marketing and sales, but we're more so on the reporting side of it. Like, you're great. Your program is fantastic on the
Thank
tactics
you.
and like what to, like, overall structure, but then also the tactics of what need to happen so that you can start closing more deals, generate more leads, and turning those
Yeah.
leads into paying customers. We're setting up the reporting side of it, the SOPs behind it, like things like that.
Yeah.
Account management, getting that churn number down, like, that's definitely something that we help with a lot. So I would say those are kind of the big one. And then SOPs, operations, like making sure that the projects are getting done on time and on budget.
Well, I think for the right agency who's listening to this and is jiving with what Chris is sharing about the problems he solves, but also his story. I mean, I just spent a couple of days with him. I've spoken on his stage now a couple of times. He's just a real great guy. The people on his team are awesome. So definitely recommend reaching out to Chris. A couple last questions here as we wrap up. What would be your, let's call it, parting advice for agency owners who are struggling with scaling?
I've tried to pour everything into this interview, so I'm going to search in my brain and see what other parting advice I can give for you guys. First of all, understanding what scaling is. So it's just recognizing that it's really a predictable outcome, a predictable growth outcome. And scaling doesn't feel fun ever. Like, it's constantly things breaking, and then you're fixing them. And they'll work for 6 months, a year, and then they're going to break again, and you have to go back in and tweak them. I would just say, have a plan. Like, you need to have, like, okay, so here's the actual advice. If it doesn't work on paper, it will never, ever, ever work in the real world. You have to prove the model on paper first and run the numbers and make sure that it's financially feasible, that this plan will work, for it to have even a shot of working in the real world. So getting it from paper to reality is still a massive hurdle. If it doesn't work on the napkin, on the spreadsheet, there's no way in hell it's going to work in the real world. And I bring that up because had I did that with my soccer magazine, never would have done it. I would have done it very, No, I wouldn't have done the soccer magazine. With my marketing agency that I started in 2012, had I done that, run the numbers and create the plan and see if it'll work on paper, I never would have charged the small prices that I was charging. I would have done that very, very differently. So it's got to work on paper for it to have any chance of succeeding in the real world.
That's sage advice. One last question for you, Chris.
Sure.
What's your motivation?
The cliche answer is like, I love helping my clients succeed, like personally, like when I die, I want to, my goal is $1 billion, right? It's a crazy goal, right? But I want to be one of those people that donates $1 billion to charities, so if I die before my wife, she's obviously going to live and have fun time. But all that money that's left over, like it's going straight to charity. We'll leave maybe a little bit to some special people, a handful of special people in our lives, a little bit, but the rest of it is going to charity. So that's like a big motivation for me. And like, I truly want to see our clients win. Like these are good, hardworking, honest people that when they have a good marketing agency, they are making a massive difference in their clients' lives. Like, that.
Yeah.
And I want to help those agency owners get rewarded with a nice pot of gold at the end of the rainbow whenever that happens. So that's what keeps me motivated and getting up and going to work every day.
Where can people reach out and connect with you, learn more about you and your program?
So we do a lot of social media content. Instagram is probably my favorite. Chris from Bloom or bloompartners.io is our company account. If you can follow me personally, I post a lot of funny dog videos too. So you can watch those. You can go to our website, bloompartners.io. If you're interested in talking with me, you can schedule an appointment. And then I do want to give everybody a copy of my book. So my book is actually called, my fourth book, Facts Not Feelings. It's the story of an agency owner who's got this agency that on paper, that in the world, it looks like, they're doing great on on social media, on Instagram. It looks like everything is going well and they're winning awards, but behind the scenes, it's an absolute disaster. And it's the story of his transformation and learning how to run the business with facts, not feelings. And then at the end, he gets an offer, which is pretty cool. So cool. I'll give you guys a free copy of that. You can go to factsnotfeelingsbook.com and I'll give you a free PDF version of the book.
Beautiful. We'll put that into the show notes as well. Chris, thanks so much for coming on the show, sharing your life, your journey. It's been awesome and just so much wisdom for all of us. So thanks again for coming on.
Thank you so much, Corey, for allowing me to share.
Thanks for tuning in to the Deep Specialization Podcast. Are you ready to find out if your agency is built to scale? Take my free 5-minute agency growth score assessment at agencygrowthscore.com. That's agencygrowthscore.com and get tailored insights across your positioning, marketing, and sales systems. Also, be sure to subscribe for more episodes that help you specialize and scale your sales with dream clients.